As we continue to explore and learn about our roots, the history of quilting in African American culture is often overlooked. Tonight, how these powerful works of art tell the stories of slavery, freedom, and family.
Each block is unique and within itself. If you look at quilts, a lot of them will tell a story.
But we know every story has a beginning.
I feel like you can't talk about the history of quilting without talking about Gee's Bend.
Well, Gee's Bend basically brought the idea of quilting to the American public.
Gee's Bend is a small settlement in Wilcox County, Alabama, once labeled one of the poorest communities in the country.
And they were still living kind of in slavery, even after slavery was abolished. These people at Gee's Bend didn't even know. They weren't even aware.
Gee's Bend is home to only a couple hundred people, most of which are descendants of slaves.
It actually began in like 1848 when this man whose last name was Gee, bought these slaves, and that's why they call it Gee's Bend.
Dorothy Page Turner, a longtime educator in the Rockford community, says it's important history more people need to know.
I did the play Gee's Bend in Rockford through Rockford University, and after doing that play, it really piqued my interest. So a year later, I went to Gee's Bend.
Dorothy says the women of Gee's Bend formed a quilting bee to help stimulate the economy.
They found materials anywhere they could find scraps of fabric. They would put it into a quilt. They carried on the traditions from Africa because they were in such an isolated community.
The shapes, symbols, colors, design, all filled with cultural tradition dating back centuries.
I was brought up with quilters in my family, and what I was told was the enslaved people would get the clothes from their masters. Whatever they gave them, they would cut it apart and sew it together, and they would make quilts.
Cleta Berryhill, owner of Cleta Stay & Sew in Rockford, says during that time it was all about functionality.
It was a matter of just necessity then. Have the slaves and have enough anything. And so in order for them to stay warm, they just sat and made these quilts with their clothes.
A big part of quilting is oral tradition. Though oral histories leave no written record, what remains are the stories passed down from generation to generation. And many believe quilt patterns relate messages to slaves preparing to escape.
Seeing a quilt outside of a home, that could make a difference from like a life and death experience.
Oh, of course it would, yeah, because you wouldn't know what direction you would go in until those were laid out there and would tell you, don't go that way, go this way.
I got an up-close look at a few Underground Railroad quilts. Cleta's hanging on display at her store.
You've made it over to Canada.
And quilt maker Charlene Bird showing me hers, all woven together by hand.
What's really unique is how the slaves used them.
The quilt codes for the Underground Railroad were hidden in plain sight, each square meaning something different.
And all these are messages that are said, and it tells you to follow it through the woods. And this one says, fill up your basket, so that with your food and whatever you need to go, that will help you through.
Charlene tells me quilts will be hung outside safe houses for slaves seeking freedom, and the symbols would tell them if it was a safe place to stop and where to go next.
The Africans that were brought over here were not dumb people. They were smart people, and they knew what they were doing,
Though the purpose of quilts has changed through the years, the stories that lie between each piece of fabric are threaded in history.
When I grew up in El Dorado, Arkansas, which is southern Arkansas, we were not as Black people, African Americans in that southern town of Arkansas, we were not allowed to try on dresses, clothing, or shoes.
Dorothy says instead of shopping at a department store, her best friend's mom would make them beautiful dresses for every occasion. And those dresses are still with her today.
They're scraps from my mother's dresses and my sister's dresses and mine in this quilt topper.
A quilt passed down from generation to generation with deep connections of family.
Everybody that I've done memory quilts for, I feel their presence when I'm doing it.
to take pride when you see these quilts. You know, look at the quilts and understand them.